Welcome back, everyone. In this module, we're going to take on the complex topic of information design. Let's get started. First, let's talk a little bit about information sent. Why it's easier typically to find content on some websites versus others. Information sent is that strength of a cue or multiple cues which lead users through an experience, or at least get them closer to a specific goal. Some examples of information sent come from iconography, signifiers like color or position. Priority and hierarchy can be great at information sent. Effectively, anything that suggests either describing what that element of navigation is or bringing priority to it can be information sent. Information sent needs to be accurate, though, of course, and in these examples we see text juxtaposed with an element of information sent like an icon, or even the color itself of the button could be information sent. The one on the left has good information sent. That signifier that's to the left of the text or gives us context to what's going to happen. On the right, the text coupled with the information sent really doesn't lead us anywhere and actually creates confusion. Context is everything. So let's get to information design. Information design is the clean and effective visualization of complex information so that it can be understood clearly and used to extract value. Anywhere there's complexity in information requires some thought around their information design. Whether it's displaying information about a product or a service or collecting information from a user, information design is extremely important to making sure that users understand what they're reading or seeing. When we describe information design, it's first and foremost not very easy to pin down, because sometimes it's visual and sometimes it's organizational. It also relies on content strategy and inputs, and it becomes the overarching motif for both function and information. Good information design will incite action, will encourage function, whereas poor information design won't. To some, information design is something that we would consider explanation design. Or it might even be better to think about it that way. Information design means that what you're doing is taking a complex set of information and structuring it in a way that it almost explains itself. Its artifacts explain how stuff works, foster understanding, and prompt informed action. Information design is part of most experiences. But although it's tough to pin down, it's more of a practice of making sense of complex information. And anytime you take that step to solidifying an experience by clarifying the information, by changing the way it's displayed or positioning it in a different order, becomes part of the information design practice. Here's an example of information design. Miller's magic number. It's a result of short-term memory studies in the 1950s by George Miller, who's a psychology professor at Harvard. In his studies, he's determined that the human brain can remember 7 chunks, plus or minus 2, single units of information. Which phone number is easier to remember? This one or this one? This is a fundamental example of good information design. Starting to sink in a little bit, I hope. Whereas on the left, a structure of 10 digits without any interruption or any segmentation is harder for us to discern or remember. And if experience design is rooted in recognition and recall, we have a little bit of a challenge on our hands if all we're doing is displaying content without any context or structure. The example on the right, of course, allows us to create that mental segmentation. We remember these groupings of the first three, the next 4. We see this commonly in numerical references where they're separated by a space or a dash. Our social insurance numbers, our telephone numbers, our credit card numbers all have a better structure than just one long, never-ending SKU or ID number. Another information design principle is one of least effort, developed by Thomas Mann. The principle is that users will naturally gravitate towards familiar and easy tools, even if the results are poor. Users will get used to using interfaces that are familiar and easy, despite there being another one that may make it better for them. So how do we solve problems with this principle? Sometimes it's contextual, and sometimes it's metaphorical. And one of the techniques that I want to highlight that is essential in information design is one that we call progressive disclosure. If you're dealing with lots of information, employing a technique like this will help get past that complexity of structure, that complexity of a very long description for something, for example. Progressive disclosure is an interaction design tactic to help keep the user focused and on task by eliminating superfluous elements, confusion, and cognitive load. This can improve usability by showing the user only the minimum info needed for what they're trying to do. And I'll give you an example of progressive disclosure in action. If you are experiencing a new product website and reading about something interesting that you didn't know, a lot of times what you'll see is 2 or 3 line sentence that is truncated with an element that says read more. Now, for you who's discovering that new product for the first time, will be more inclined to click that read more, to expand that section of the website, to dig into another paragraph or 2 about that topic. What about for the user that already understands the product and they just want to get to adding it into their basket? Progressive disclosure gives you enough information to understand that you can expand it, but for the user that already has that knowledge, they can quickly skim over that information. That's our introduction to information design. We'll see you in the next module.